Okay, think back in the Nintendo 64 days. You have the 3D platformers like Super Mario 64, Conker's Bad Fur Day, and Banjo-Kazooie, name a few. Now think on 2D platformers. You have Yoshi's Story and Kirby 64. But what if I told you there's one that predates both of them, and at least I'd argue surpassed in terms of uniqueness? I'd like to introduce you to the most overlooked games on the Nintendo 64, Mischief Makers. The game was released in 1997 in Japan by Enix, and also in 1997 US by Nintendo, and everywhere else the following year. This was 5 months before the release of Yoshi's Story, and roughly 2.5 years from Kirby 64. The game was spearheaded by Treasure, the company formed of ex-Konami employees that were responsible for Gunstar Heroes, Alien Soldier, and one of my personal favorites, Sin and Punishment. The game opens with us naming our profile, and let's go with the most clever name I could think of, and I put in my age. Now there's actually a bit of story in Mischief Makers, but it all takes a backseat compared to the game's humor. Professor Theo, a famous robotic scientist, goes to the planet of Clancer, but gets kidnapped immediately. Then comes in Marina Lightyear, no relation, also known as Marina, the ultra-intergalactic Cybot G, the savior created from the Emperor of Clancer. Now, there's a lot to be said about the gameplay of Mischief Makers, and calling it exclusively a 2D platform would be a lie, but I'll explain that more later. The first stage gives you a quick idea of how to play, but unlike most N64 games, you don't use your well-worn analog stick. Instead, move up your hand to the D-pad and it works really well with this game. The game is coupled with a heavy focus on Marina's grabbing ability, giving the game a flavor that Yoshi's Story could not, and grabbing stuff just feels completely natural in this game. The hit detection is spot on, and jumping off grab things feels great. Though, when jumping off of some things there's a bit of delay with Marina doing a small wind-up comparably to Simon's whip attack in Castlevania. But her abilities don't just stop right there. There's also her jet ability that lets her quickly dash around the stages, and this works in multiple directions, giving you a lot of control over your movement, and the D-pad moves you quicker than the C buttons. And lastly, the ability to roll by double tapping down. This can help you get out of harm's way, though I do forget about this feature from time to time. Oh, how can I forget? While Marina is grabbing things, she can shake them, but I'll get into more of this later. And you meet our world's inhabitants, the Clancers, and these things kinda creep me out. They just seem like the gyroids from Animal Crossing, just with a lack of a soul. And there's two factions of them, one's for the Emperor, or ones who oppose him, but these guys just aren't for looking at. The ones on your side actually give you helpful tips on how to play properly to fully enjoy this game, compared to the other ones who come with very detached from just staying there and throwing things, to just straight up getting up into your grill and taking a whack at you. But also depending what stage and what exactly is going on, they change up their strategies, leaving them fairly varied throughout the game. Now, enemies aren't the only thing that litter the stages. Found in all of them are these gems. They come in 4 designer colors, red, blue, green, and yellow, and they play an interesting role with your life in the game. Now, you only have 1 life, and sorta unlimited continues, but you aren't limited to just 1 bar of health. Collecting the blue, green, and yellow gems increase your health by varying degrees. But finding those yellow ones are extremely rare and usually require some skill to get to them, but they serve another purpose that I'll get into later. While the red ones are instead used for continues, with increasing values with how many bars of health you respawn with, but don't ever go for the first one. That one's just a waste. Just reset your console and you get 1 bar of health by default. And don't bother for grinding for life if you're only going to turn off the game shortly afterwards, since you get the 1 bar of health by default, and you lose everything else. And they're also used for Miss Hint. For 10 gems a pop, she'll give you hints for bosses, stages, or just how to play. However, sometimes she can be extremely vague on what to do. I like to think of her as that teacher you had during high school. You know the one. Now let's get back to the story at hand. Now the plot repeats itself often. After you save Professor Theo for the first time, he gets captured again, and rinse and repeat this for the rest of the game. But there's an overarching plot involving the Emperor of Clancer and his 3 strongest men, the Beast Sectors. I think I pronounced that right. And boy, these guys are hilarious. The Emperor wants Marina and Professor Theo alive, but they think otherwise, leading to great dialogue. And there's a bit of voice acting with the clips and gameplay that will get stuck in your head for years to come, such as... and... You're welcome to enjoy the years of therapy to get them out of your head. But what's a game without its gameplay? And Mischief Makers nails it. Now I already explained the unique controls for the N64, but the stages are just as different and memorable. You have the standard run left to the right stages while taking out baddies on the way, but then there's others that have no bad guys and rely exclusively on platforming. Creativity oozes from these stages, like where you have to ride this missile from the start to the end of the stage, or use this giant robot to get to the end of the stage. Hell, there's a stage where you have to compete in an Olympic-like an event just to save the professor. And remember what I said, hammer on the D-pad instead of the C buttons for the dash race. You'll thank me later. There's even 2 stages where you don't play as Marina, but instead one of the Solo's Clancers. and it controls quite differently compared to Marina, and this stays all consistent with the controls so you're never lost with them. But you can get lost with the learning curve, and boy, this game will sometimes leave you scratching your head saying, how was I supposed to know that? Like this mage stage in the Barren Snow. It honestly took me a while to understand the puzzles ahead of me since there was little to no explanation within this stage. But in other stages, Miss Hen is your friend. Sometimes. So don't be completely afraid of talking to her for advice. And the level design is great once you see how it's all put together. Each jump, enemy, and object is placed just right that you never mess up due to the game. It's your own fault for not making that jump or not dodging that bullet. Also, don't forget to explore around the stages that net you additional things like yellow gems. Although the stages are short and you can beat a lot of them in less than a minute if you know what you're doing. And your rank from D to S depending how quickly you complete it. Good luck on getting higher than an A. It's a pain. But if there was any unique stage that you liked, it most likely did not repeat anywhere else in the game, but at least you can revisit it at any given time. Lastly, we have the boss fights, and they are some of the biggest highlights of the game. The real first boss fights against this giant lizard and his father. There are two small ones beforehand, but they don't really count. But this is a prime example of how boss fights work. Each fight has a small sound effect and circle gives you indication of where and when to grab. But be quick and even quicker to throw them to damage them due to they quickly break free from any grapple. And there's a risk versus reward system with them as well. Once they attack you have two options, dodge it or try and grab it. Grabbing it yields you health, red gems, sometimes yellow gems, but messing up of course gets you roasted. But there is a variety to the bosses, and some actually have a few different ways of beating them, like against Sasquatch Beta. He's in a giant tank throwing rocks at you, and you're left with two options. You can go with the straightforward solution and toss rocks at him, or the less obvious route, go straight up to his cannon and redirect the blast to instead hit him for a lot more damage. Now, this isn't the only boss to do this, but this gives you an idea that there isn't just one way to beat some of the bosses. Miss Hen is in any of the stages prior to a boss fight, so she can help you out assuming she's not being vague. But like in some of the stages, these aren't quite straightforward, so I recommend learning this phrase, when in doubt, shake it. I know people are going to take this out of context. This goes for stages too, so if you see something, shake it. This sometimes can reward you with extra life, if not other objects. Now once you beat all the bosses, and thus the game, all that's left is the ending, and it does things differently. And I'm not sure to what extent I like this, but I don't dislike it either. Those yellow gems, aside from giving you a huge health boost, actually determine how much of the ending you get to see. A number is indicated on the top left, and then it counts down until you're out of gems, then it cuts back to the main menu. And getting a lot of them is hard, and some are even harder when you have to defeat a boss without taking damage. Honestly, I never got them all, and I probably never will. Like I said, the game's story is second to its gameplay, so I don't really think I'm missing anything. But I wonder, why didn't this game catch on? The reviews weren't terrible, though not super positive at the time of its release. But maybe it's from the commercial that Nintendo put out. Well, here's a clip of that.
Speed ain't there, honey, but I need gold gems. The professor cannot wait forever. The evil empire will not allow it. So, where are you going? Here's mine.
I don't blame those kids. I would have done the same thing, if anything, a little bit faster. Not to sound mean, but did they learn anything from the Earthbound advertising campaign? But I'm getting off topic. But Mischief Makers has a couple of problems I haven't brought up yet. It's short, clocking a little less than 5 hours for my second playthrough, considering I did forget a couple of things since my last playthrough a little over 3 years ago. I'm so old. And honestly, the game really isn't that hard. Once you figure out what you have to do, you'll quickly blow through most, if not all, the stages. Mischief Makers is not a perfect game, but a well-crafted one that has aged exceptionally well compared to its brothers released on the N64 and the PlayStation. With so much variety, the game never really gets stale, but it falls short on a couple notes. But even those notes aren't completely sour. If anything looks interesting to you from this gameplay, it's meant for you. If you're into indie games, I think this is also up your alley too. It's on the Nintendo 64 for less than $20, if not the Wii's Virtual Console if that suits your tastes. Well, that's about everything for this game. But thank you for tuning in, and just remember, when in doubt, shake it. Oh god. You're still here? Well, there's another video. Till next time.